All right, hello everybody. See if we are working. Looks like it. Welcome in. Again, let me know where you're watching from, and let me know if you can hear me loud and clear. Those are the things that are important to me right now. So, again, we'll give it a good 5 minutes or so, probably even a little bit longer than that, to let some people funnel in here. Day two of live goat talk. Well, we'll see if I'm still the goat by the end of this thing. All right, again, I'm going to give it about 5 minutes. Let everyone funnel in. Let all the notifications flood people's phones, and then we will get started here with Hurricane Helene. It is here again. We've been forecasting this thing for a while now, and we now officially do have a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. So just kind of one of those things that was expected. So that's always not good to see that something like this is happening, but at least good from a meteorological standpoint that a forecast looks to be verifying. So good for the science, obviously, there. All right, got people watching just east of Charlotte. All right, everyone else, let me know where you're watching from. I know CJ's watching from the Midlands of South Carolina. Longtime viewer CJ Mitchell. Thank you for tuning in, CJ. Appreciate it. Watching from Louisiana. Hello, Bonnie. Bonnie's also another longtime viewer. Thank you for tuning in, Bonnie. All right. Again, going to give it about 5 minutes or so here. Let people kind of flood in before we get started and start talking again on Hurricane Helene, soon to be Major Hurricane Helene here on down the road. Probably as soon as tomorrow, I would imagine. Well, it would have to be tomorrow because we get landfall tomorrow. So, yeah, I don't think we probably won't cross major status tonight, but I think tomorrow definitely we'll get there. I do expect some more rapid intensification as we get past this evening. And once we get towards, again, the early morning hours of tomorrow, that process will probably begin. All right, again, everyone funneling in here, welcome. Let me know where you're watching from, and make sure, just again, remind me that you can hear me loud and clear. Looks like a lot of people are saying the sound and video is coming through pretty good, so that's a good sign. I'll add also, if I'm like looking this way, I'm reading the chat. I have the chat pulled up on a laptop next to me. So again, I'm not doing this just so you can get my side profile. All right, again, going to give it probably about 3 more minutes. Everyone let me know in the chat kind of how you're preparing for Helene. Personally, I'm preparing to storm chase Helene, so I'm not really having to prepare for the impacts here, specifically in Charlotte, although there will be impacts, in fact, under a tropical storm warning here now. But I will be chasing this thing, leaving bright and early, or even before bright and early, because it'll still be dark when I'm leaving late tonight and into tomorrow morning here. And I'm going to take these out too now that I know that the sound is working properly. So again, I'm excited to chase this thing. I'm going to head down to Florida actually for it with my buddy Mitch West from GMWeather. So a lot of you folks probably familiar with Mitch. In fact, a lot of you came to my channel from Mitch's channel. Mitch was very nice and gave me a couple of shout outs whenever I first started. On the YouTube thing, and really helped me jumpstart this thing. So obviously a huge shout out to Mitch and everything that he does. Hiding in your closet. All right, well, that's one way to do it. Peachtree City, Georgia. Yep, gonna get it good in Peachtree City. I think definitely some tropical storm conditions there out of this thing at least, as it kind of works on inland here into Georgia. All right, we're gonna start here any minute. Any Jim Cantori sightings? I'm sure Jim is probably somewhere in Florida if I had to guess. Yeah, I'm sure we'll get plenty of good Jim video, but you can also tune into my live streaming. I'm going to try to, or excuse me, into my storm chasing. I'm going to try to live stream it a little bit. Mitch will be live streaming some. We'll probably alternate. So he'll probably stream for a little bit and I'll kind of monitor his chat and all, and then maybe I'll stream a little bit and he'll monitor it for me. So again, we're gonna tag team this thing. A couple Carolina YouTubers going on down there and making the best of it in Florida. Prepped and ready here in Florida, we're outside the cone. Well, that brings up a very good point. Whether you're in the cone or not with this storm, we're going to have impacts well outside of the cone. So that's a very good point there. So thank you for making that I can't, let me see if I can find who made that. Ellie. So yeah, outside of the cone there, but still going to feel impacts through the entire state of Florida. So again, do not focus so much on the cone in terms of impacts. Now you can maybe use the cone kind of ish. Actually, I won't even say that. The cone is really just used for where the center of the storm is going to go. It doesn't tell you really anything about impacts, but I'll show you a map that does show you impacts here in the live stream. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive into things. We got about 100 people here so far. We'll go ahead and start talking. So starting off with the current look at Hurricane Helene, sun setting over the Gulf of Mexico currently, and this, by the time we're doing this tomorrow with the sun setting, we will be at landfall or about to have it or just had it into the Florida Panhandle and Big Bend region. So, this storm moved quick. I know we've been talking about it forever. I can go back on YouTube, and you know what? I'm actually going to do it right now. I'm going to go back and check on YouTube to see how long I've been talking about this thing. Let's see here. It's probably been a good week or so. Let's see. Yeah, okay, so I first teased this on YouTube 9 days ago. So, you can't tell me you didn't have a heads up. You had a 10-day, basically, runtime before landfall. So, again, we've been talking about this thing for a while, but now really getting into kind of the nitty-gritty of it as, again, Helene is entering the Gulf of Mexico. And on satellite imagery, a pretty healthy-looking storm. Now, the storm did have a little bit of dry air that kind of tried to wrap into it this morning, and it's still fighting off a little bit of that dry air. You can especially see it here, and we'll see it even better whenever we take a look at infrared here in a second. But again, kind of fighting off that dry air. We're seeing convection bubbling up here right near the center of the storm. And once it kind of is done clearing out this dry air, that's when rapid intensification can kind of begin here going into the overnight tonight. And especially, I think the first half of tomorrow is when we'll probably see the biggest ramp up in wind speeds here. And latest forecast is for a major Category 4 hurricane to make landfall. And then, I've titled this live stream to Helene to bring generational impacts. I think into portions of Georgia and South Carolina and the mountains of North Carolina, this will be a storm that it'll be the worst that some folks have seen in their life whenever we look at the flooding combined with the inland wind risk. I think really on an inland side of things, this is going to have generational impacts. In fact, I was reading some of the National Weather Service kind of forecasting here, and there could be enough rain in portions of the Carolinas here, again, in the higher terrain, that we get kind of terrain altering landfall or rainfall, which basically means that you get so much rain and the creeks and streams flood so much that it kind of forever changes some of the topography. Now, when I say that, I don't mean that Mount Mitchell is going to magically cave in or anything like that, but you'll get some isolated spots that could potentially look very different after Helene compared to what they looked like beforehand, just due to all of that rainfall and then a lot of that wind bringing down some trees and power lines as well. So again, I do think we'll see generational sorts of impacts, kind of like how we had with Hugo, and I don't say that to compare the storm to Hugo in any direct way, but just more or less to say, for Hugo, for example, people in the Charlotte area, remember that one. I can tell you, living here and going to school here, you ask anybody who was alive in 1989, you say, well, what's the worst storm you've seen in Charlotte? It's Hugo. They say Hugo, just because of how insane those inland impacts were. And again, I think Helene could be similar. So a strengthening storm on visible. Unfortunately, the sun is setting here, so we're not going to be able to use that tool as much. But what we can use here is our infrared satellite. And again, you'll notice a strengthening storm. You can already kind of see right where that center of circulation is. And this thing's going to try to clear out an eye here relatively soon. I wouldn't be surprised to see an eye kind of begin to show up here by the time we get into the overnight hours here, and by the time we're crossing into early morning tomorrow, I would expect that. Now, another thing I want you to know is look at the sheer size of this thing. So this is the Yucatan Peninsula. This is the state of Florida. And then this is kind of the Georgia-Florida line. So I'll kind of just highlight those areas. And I can zoom out as well. The cloud field on this thing is pretty ridiculous. And let me do that actually. Let me zoom out here. Look at this thing. I mean, you've got this kind of banding feature that's still bringing or still all the way down into the Caribbean. And you're getting all of this divergence aloft that is kind of ripping the upper levels of the atmosphere over the southeast. And that's why we have such a big time flooding threat. It's multiple features here synoptically that are going to lead to it. We've got a big upper level low kind of parked over the Mississippi River Valley. that is bringing a bit of a jet streak here at 500 millibars, which is just an area of very fast winds that are pulling up from Helene here. That's one of the reasons the storm's going to move quickly, but it's also creating tons of divergence aloft, which is leading to, again, the storm kind of needing to fill in that air that gets ripped out from above it. And that's why we're seeing a deepening pressure, a strengthening storm, and just these plumes of moisture getting pulled northward. So just really a massive storm. And that's something we've talked about for a while too, that the size of this system would be quite a big deal, not just the intensity of it. But like I mentioned, again, a strengthening storm, healthy looking. Here's the center, just still fighting a little bit of dry air, which, wasn't totally unexpected, but I think the storm will, handle it pretty well here. And again, National Hurricane Center and the latest model guidance does suggest a Category 4 storm at landfall in about 24 hours. All right, latest from Aircraft Recon, and the nice thing about doing this live is we can kind of watch this together. Again, we've got aircraft flying in there, so you'll notice they're kind of still only about halfway probably through their mission here, flying in and out of the storm, kind of in this X pattern. The reason they do this is, one, to kind of measure the wind field, see how big it is, and also they'll drop multiple measurement devices into the storm at different points to help kind of forecast the steering currents, where it's strengthening, how it's strengthening, and all sorts of things that will help us forecast it on down the road. So again, you see the little plane icon here. They're flying through the storm. They have found pretty strong winds in it, and we'll go ahead and switch to another map here that'll help us look at this even better. Let's see, when is this drop sound from? This might be the latest drop sound. Yeah, so they just dropped, again, a measuring device into the storm, and they're finding pressures of about 975 millibars at the surface here in the eye, which is, obviously a pretty good bit of deepening. Now, the storm has leveled off a little bit in strengthening, and I would expect that. We took a look at it on satellite. Again, it's still kind of in the process of getting its act together here. So still in those early, stages of strengthening, not quite to that rapid intensification. But again, I think after a couple more hours of organization, and then kind of once we get into tomorrow morning, rapid intensification could occur with the system here. But again, already down to 975 millibars, which you're thinking, well, that's basically almost a Category 2 hurricane with that kind of pressure, right? Well, not technically. Again, we go back to satellite here, and we look at how massive the storm is. Whenever you have such a big storm, you need deeper pressure to really get that wind up, because again, that pressure drop is kind of accounting for the wind field for this entire storm. So that wind is getting spread out over a bigger distance, which is bringing down that wind maximum, or just the highest levels of wind that we're seeing. So, I mean, this thing could have 940 millibar pressure and still potentially be a Category 3 at landfall. So, the pressure is important to look at for strengthening wise, but don't use it to exactly equate maybe what kind of pressure means what category system. Probably not the best way to do that. All right, let me read a couple comments here and then we'll keep on going. Oh, also, yes, very good point. If you're watching, like the stream for me. If you're not already subscribed, go ahead and do so. We hit 10,000 subscribers last night, and we're already knocking on the doorstep of 10,200. So we've had some incredible growth here with Helene, which obviously you hate to see a storm, but it has definitely brought a lot of growth to the channel. So I'm very thankful for that, and thankful for all of you tuning in. So again, like the stream, subscribe if you haven't already, comment. Again, if you haven't, let me know where you're watching from. Do that. That helps me kind of know what to talk about. And again, I'll get to all the questions specifically at the end, but I'm going to read a couple of these and kind of answer a couple here throughout. So I do see one question. Could it ramp up to Cat 5? It's not out of the realm of possibilities, but I really think Category 3 to 4 is that most likely range for landfall. And that's what I've been forecasting for 3 or 4 days plus now. I've stuck to my guns and I'm going to stick to it. Not that Category 5 is impossible. I just think probably 3 or 4 is going to be the most likely scenario. But again, I'll note 160 mile Category 5 versus 155 mile Category 4. I mean, you're not really getting much difference there. So, once you get to a certain point, the category of the storm only means so much for the impacts that you're going to feel on the ground. North Carolina is under a state of emergency. Yeah, I know Florida is. I imagine Georgia and both Carolinas are. In fact, this is the map we're looking at now anyway. So the entire state of South Carolina is under a tropical storm warning. I imagine probably for the first time ever. Now, with that being said, this is the first time, we just started issuing inland tropical storm warnings to this extent, probably about 5 or 10 years ago or somewhere in that ballpark. So, not necessarily super big data set to use. But either way, it's very impressive. This entire area of the Southeast, the entire state of Florida, basically, the entire state of Georgia and South Carolina are under tropical storm warnings. And that's what this map is showing you. So these kind of dark red colors that you see over South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, those are tropical storm warnings. And let me take the cone of uncertainty off here for a second, just so we can dive into these warnings and watches. These darker, kind of pinkish, maroonish, well, maybe not maroon, more pink to hot pink colors, whatever you want to call it here. I'll kind of outline it so you can see it a little bit better. These are hurricane warnings, and this is pretty remarkable, folks. We're seeing hurricane warnings stretch all the way inland to Macon, Georgia. I mean, Macon, Georgia is under a hurricane warning, and I could actually, let me pull out my phone. Let me see how far Macon, Georgia is from the coast. It's got to be at least 100 miles, so we can figure that out right now. All right, yeah, Macon, Georgia is nearly 200 miles from the Gulf of Mexico and under a hurricane warning. So if that tells you anything about this storm, I think it really should. It's just remarkable how far inland these severe impacts are going to stretch, and the wind isn't the only impact. Let's take a look at the mountains here of North Carolina, South Carolina, and into the foothills. We already have flash flood warnings here for the Asheville area. We've got flash flood warnings through East Tennessee, and the storm is just now getting into the Gulf of Mexico. So when I talk about generational potential flooding and wind impacts, I'm really talking about an area in here that I'll go ahead and draw for you. I think really this area right into here could potentially see, again, generational levels of flooding and wind combined. I think some of the scenes that we see here are going to be quite incredible by the time we're waking up Friday morning to some of the damage. And again, that's not even including the impacts of the coast. I mean, you folks into Florida, obviously into the Big Bend, are going to see big time problems out of this, big time storm surge, and big time wind, but the freshwater flooding threat, it'll be a bigger problem inland. So again, just a map full of problems here, and one that's probably only going to expand as we get further into the storm system. So with that said, let's go ahead and look at the cone here and kind of dive into that a little bit. So another thing I'll show you here, the current wind field, you see that area in the kind of bigger yellow circle here on your map? That's the current extent of tropical storm force winds. So obviously, if we move the storm kind of here, and I think the wind field will only expand with time, and we draw that same general area, the entire state of Florida likely to get tropical storm force winds out of this, thus all of the tropical storm warnings that you see. Thank you very much, Scott, for the $5 donation. I appreciate that. And you're very welcome. So I do appreciate that. By the way, if you do feel so inclined to donate, obviously feel free to do so. But any kind of proceeds that I get from this help to fund my education, which if you're not familiar with college, it's not cheap. So again, that's kind of one of the amazing things about YouTube, has helped me kind of alleviate some of that. So again, thank you so much, Scott. It means a lot. So again, talking about strength here of the storm a little bit. We are, again, now expecting a Category 4 storm at landfall. The National Hurricane Center is with winds potentially of 130 to 140 miles per hour as it moves right here, again, somewhere into kind of the Appalachia Bay into the Big Bend of Florida. Now, it could be anywhere in this cone. We could get landfall, but personally, I'm more of the thought it's going to be kind of on this side of the cone. I really do think we're going to see landfall probably into that region. And I can pull up some town names here, or actually, it should just load on its own. So let's get rid of these alerts so we can see a little bit better here. So the Woodville area of Florida down here to Alligator Point, Live Oak Island, kind of into this region, back out towards Cabbage Grove. I think this is the most likely area to get landfall. And remember, it's the right-hand side of the storm that's going to get the worst of the weather. So this is a storm surge map, and we'll dive into this more in a second. But if the storm is here, let me draw that with a bigger kind of line so you can see it. If the storm is making landfall right into here, the worst of those winds and the worst of that surge is going to be right into this region here in that right front quadrant. And that's where we could see potentially 15 feet of storm surge is not out of the question. Now, that's at the coast. This moves inland, and the National Hurricane Center is still forecasting again, hurricane here through South Georgia as this kind of crosses through the Warner Robins area, the Macon area, and then eventually up through the Atlanta metro, getting into tropical storm strength, and then finally kind of fizzling out and losing some of its tropical characteristics over the Tennessee River Valley by the time we get into Friday afternoon. So that's the latest cone here. I want to talk about the track a little bit because I've gotten a ton of questions recently. Are we seeing an east trend? Are we seeing a west trend? I saw a wobble here. I saw a wobble there. And to be quite honest with you, there just hasn't been much change in the track altogether. And I'll point something out here. We just looked at the cone. And it lines up very well with these model tracks I'm showing you right here. It kind of takes it again into that area and then brings it through West Georgia near the Alabama state line. I'm of the thought process, though, that I really do think that this is going to be further on the east side of this cone. I think this is going to track up kind of through the Atlanta metro, maybe just to the northeast of the Atlanta metro. And I'll show you why. Again, these are our hurricane models that kind of bring it right here into this region. But let's take a look at some global ensembles, specifically the European. And you'll notice it looks a little different inland and even at the coast. Again, kind of a lot of these members are right into that big bend that I talked about on the east side of that cone, even far enough east that it's outside of the cone. And then most of it bring it right through Atlanta or maybe even potentially on one side of Atlanta or the other. But a lot of ensemble members here are kind of leaning towards the eastern side of that cone, which would increase impacts in places like upstate South Carolina, Columbia, Charlotte, and into that region. Now, no matter what, we're going to see impacts into this region that I have circled. You're on the right side of the cone, but the closer you are to the center on the right side of the cone, the worse the wind will be, and probably the worse the flooding will be as well. But one thing I'll note, even far outside of this, well into eastern North Carolina, we're going to have a tornado threat out of this. So it's a little less important for you folks to track, but it's going to be, I don't want to say make or break, but it is going to play a big role into Georgia and the western half of the Carolinas, how severe your impacts are, depending on kind of which one of these ensemble members are right. And the overall setup of the storm is weird because it's getting steered by this big upper level low, and they're kind of merging here and phasing together. And in fact, we're kind of getting some Fujiwara effect almost over the state of Georgia and into Tennessee as these two systems combine and then just create one big upper level low. So the global models have consistently been further east than kind of the hurricane models. And I can't help but wonder if maybe some of the interaction with these synoptic features are moving it further east in those global models and could potentially be affecting the overall track there. So again, I'm leaning towards the east side of that cone, but obviously the experts, they're the best in the world at forecasting these things. So it's important to look at their cone. All right, let me read a couple more comments here, and then we'll start talking about some impacts, some threats, and timing things out. Yeah, the boat dude talking about moving east of Atlanta due to that cutoff low. Again, I kind of agree. I don't know how far east of Atlanta it'll get, but I really do think that we're going to be on the east side of that cone for sure. A lot of questions. Again, if you're just now joining us, like the stream, share it with somebody, subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know where you're watching from. And then again, we'll get to all these questions about specific locations towards the end. All right, speaking of that, let's go ahead and dive into some things. So we are going to start here with the tornado threat. It's something that is going to be a problem, to be completely honest. In fact, we've had a tornado today in North Carolina, right into the Rutherfordton area. We've had a couple tornado warnings into just outside of upstate South Carolina there along the Georgia line, kind of between Oconee County and some of those Georgia counties right near the Tallulah Falls area. We had a tornado warning and some pretty impressive hail as well. So atmosphere is very unstable out there right now because that we're seeing some of these strong storms. But through tonight, I just do want to mention here, and let me zoom in so we can kind of take a look at some of these communities a little bit more in depth and help you see them. Might help if I do it this way. Let's see here. Let's see. Maybe if I zoom in more and then rotate it more that way. Okay, yeah, that should work better. All right, so we do have a 2% chance of a couple tornadoes through the rest of this evening, really from now through tonight, anywhere basically through the state of Florida here. Oh, if I could put the map in the right place, that would help, wouldn't it? Let's see. Yeah, so through the state of Florida, again, anywhere down here, and then up into kind of this corridor from the I-85 corridor of Atlanta, up through Greenville, Spartanburg, into western North Carolina, and then back down into kind of even portions of eastern Alabama there. So this isn't even from Helene. Now, this stuff in Florida, yeah, you could argue that's from Helene, but basically what's happening is we have this stalled out front here from this upper level low. Again, kind of trying to push a little bit of cold air out here, and it is just stalled out, and we're getting these rounds of rain and thunderstorms that are rotating kind of along this front that have created a couple tornadoes today, and will likely continue that into tonight. So again, you need to be on guard in this area for the chance of an isolated tornado through the rest of this evening. Now, elsewhere, we get into tomorrow, and we're going to continue this tornado threat. In fact, we have an enhanced risk of a couple tornadoes tomorrow. You know what? This is, I'm going to change it up for you real quick. Give me 1 second. I know you're looking at a black screen, but I think it's going to be a lot easier if we look at this on a different website. So we'll do that. Give me uno momento. All right, beautiful. This is going to work a lot better for us, I think. All right, yeah, so tomorrow, tornado threat is once again going to be a problem for a lot of folks here. Into portions of coastal Georgia, coastal South Carolina, and really the entire state of Florida. But look at this. We have a 10% area here for potential tornadoes as these kind of bands rotate in as Helene moves northward. And this is quite rare to see. It's not often that we see this high of a threat this far in advance for a tropical system from the Storm Prediction Center. So it's, again, it's quite impressive to see a threat level this high in the tornado department. So something we're going to want to monitor for sure. Absolutely could bring some problems. And one of the reasons for that is dry air. Again, we are getting a little bit of dry air on the east side, not enough to really cut off too much rain, but enough to bring breaks in the clouds. That combined with all the shear we're seeing, again, definitely concerned here through the PD of South Carolina, the Sandhills of North Carolina, all the way down the I-95 corridor into the state of Florida for a couple tornadoes tomorrow. And that won't be the end of it. We're also watching Friday here. Look at this, another area for potential tornadoes here through the eastern half of North Carolina, southern Virginia. We'll say from the Wilmington area all the way up the I-95 corridor through Raleigh, Durham, back towards the Greensboro area. And I'll mention, depending on the track of the storm, if it shifts closer to Alabama, then all of this will shift with it. If it shifts closer to South Carolina, then, this could get cut off a little bit more and just be into this region. So definitely stay tuned. But a tornado outbreak, very possible with Helene. And in fact, we've seen tornadoes yesterday and today, even before Helene got here. So this is just kind of going to add insult to injury. All right, thank you so much for that, Paul. I appreciate it. It says, great job. We appreciate the information. Well, I'm glad I can be of use to you because, I'm spending all this time getting the degree. Might as well put some use to it, right? Might as well help some people out. So thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. That means a lot. All right, so we talked about the tornado threat. Let's go ahead and dive on into some timing here, some future radar, and some more impacts because, again, this is going to be a bit of a marathon. So you folks into upstate South Carolina, North Georgia, Western North Carolina, it's basically started now for you. The impacts of the storm is now till it leaves by Friday, and this is why. This is this evening. I'm going to move it ahead even another hour here. You'll notice we've got just this, again, this stalled out front. And what's happening is here's Helene moving northward, and it's just bringing all of this Atlantic and Gulf moisture up kind of at the same time, and it's running into this front, and it's running into the Appalachian mountain chain, and watch what happens as I move this ahead in time. Now, again, we'll focus more on Florida here in just a second, but I just want to talk about this prefrontal rain for a moment. Look what happens. We just get round after round after round after round of heavy rain to set up, and I'll say this has shifted east a little bit. Yesterday, this was more over North Georgia, it looked like on the models. And now you folks in Pickens County, Anderson County, back down towards Abbeville, Greenwood, Spartanburg, Greenville, and then up into Brevard, the Hendersonville area, Rutherfordton, up the spine of the Appalachians here into the Boone area. This is big time training of heavy rainfall. And this is, again, it's going to stay like this. I mean, we'll get breaks, obviously, and the, kind of band will shift right and left a little bit. So some folks might get it worse than others. Not everyone's going to see, rain for the rest of tonight. But some of you folks, I'm really concerned about flash flooding starting as early as really now. And I don't know what decisions the schools have made in South Carolina. I think back home where I'm from in Pickens County, I think they're still going tomorrow. Obviously, I don't make those decisions, but I would be concerned about flooding during the day tomorrow into this corridor that I've got circled on your map through Northeast Georgia, the western upstate of South Carolina, and then into the mountains of North Carolina. I would be concerned. So who knows? They might change it. Maybe no one goes tomorrow in that part of the state. But again, look at tonight, just round after round, training after training after training. We wake up tomorrow morning, it's still raining, and then the shield of rain just continues to build and becomes a bigger kind of problem for a lot more people, not just kind of where we have that band of heavy rainfall. And then that continues. We get into Thursday afternoon. Here comes the storm. Obviously, watching these feeder bands working over the state of Florida again tomorrow. That tornado threat into the low country of South Carolina, southern Georgia into the state of Florida. This circled area. Notice how we've got these breaks of dry air working in there. That's going to really up our CAPE values or our instability or thunderstorm fuel, however you want to think about it. And these storms, they could really begin to rotate. And I'll tell you, as we're driving down there, me and Mitch tomorrow, we very well could run into some of this and have to maybe make a quick pit stop to chase some tornadoes as well on the way. We'll see. But again, it is a concern for sure tomorrow. And then obviously we get towards landfall, and by this point, the worst of it on the Florida coast, which we're going to go ahead and dive into here in just a moment. But again, I just want to continue to focus on this inland flooding threat. And folks in Florida, I don't want you to think I'm forgetting about you. I kind of have a whole separate segment for you. Don't worry, we're gonna get in there. We're really gonna dive into your impacts, including once we get into the kind of the storm surge part of things is whenever we'll really dive into Florida. Sorry, just reading a couple comments here. Can I explain why a 10% chance of tornadoes is actually a big deal? Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I can go back and talk about that really quickly just because I do think maybe that kind of gets lost in what exactly I mean by that. So you got me pulling up all sorts of different maps now. Let's see. Day 2 tornado. We'll go over here. Yeah, so basically what this map shows from the Storm Prediction Center is the chance of seeing a tornado within a 25-mile radius. So basically, what are the odds of seeing a tornado within 25 miles of your home? And down here into southern Georgia and kind of into Beaufort County, South Carolina, they're saying it's a 1 in 10 shot, which doesn't sound like a lot per se. But if on a normal day it's a 1 in 1,000 or a 1 in 100 shot, and then you jump up to a 1 in 10 shot, that's a big time increase. And think about it as a lottery ticket. If somebody told you you had a 1 in 10 chance of winning the lottery, you're going to go buy a ticket. So in the same case here, if you've got a 1 in 10 shot of seeing a tornado within 25 miles of your house, you're going to take those precautions. You're going to stay weather aware. You're going to listen to your local meteorologist. You're going to have your weather radio playing. You're going to do all the things. So that was a great question. And I think that's a good point to drive home. So thank you for that question. Oh yeah, okay. So I do have a comment. Somebody here talking about look at the storm. It looks pretty weak. So this is the high resolution rapid refresh model. This is not a hurricane model. So the storm, I'm really showing you this to more show you where the rain is falling, not so much the intensity. And don't worry, we'll get into a model or two that I think does a better job with intensity here on down the road in just a moment. But again, don't focus so much on the millibar value here. Just kind of focus on where you're seeing the shield of rain and where you're seeing the tornado threat and where you're seeing those sorts of things. Don't focus so much on the intensity with this map, at least. Now you can focus more on intensity here in a minute whenever I show you impacts. But just looking at the rainfall map here. So again, just talking about that flooding threat, heavy rain moving through South Carolina, Georgia, and even eastern Alabama here. I'll mention, I think a flood watch has been issued for you folks as well. And there's going to be actually kind of a reason why I do think we could see very heavy rain on the eastern side, on the western side of the system here as well. And I'll show you why. We move this storm inland. Again, look at that, where the worst of the rain is going to be kind of right around this core where we're going to get, a heavy rainfall. Also, though, I need to watch for this banding coming in off the Atlantic. We could get enhanced rainfall totals off of that well inland into South Carolina and North Carolina. I need to watch that as that moves inland. But notice what happens as this system kind of phases with our upper level low. And you can see that on our kind of pressure values here. You're getting kind of this troughing showing up. And that's really going to connect the systems. And look at all this rain breaking out even on the western side of the storm, well inland here. That could be something we need to watch for sure with this storm system as it pulls northward and again kind of merges and becomes just one big time low pressure system. All right, let's dive into kind of more direct impacts here into the state of Florida and surrounding areas upon landfall. And can I talk about the effects for Destin to Panama City Beach area? Yep, we'll do that right now. Any chance for tornadoes in Lexington, South Carolina? First time watching, and you're doing a great job. Well, thank you, RJ. I appreciate that. Yeah, Lexington, South Carolina, the Midlands of South Carolina in general. I would watch for a tornado threat really all day tomorrow, but especially overnight tomorrow as the storm pulls northward here, and then potentially even early Friday morning, needing to watch for that continued tornado threat. So, good question there. Again, I'll remind everyone, if you haven't already liked the stream, do so. Consider sharing it with somebody in this part of the world that might need it. Let's do that and subscribe as well if you haven't already. So, okay, let's go ahead and move this ahead into time. This is a model that I think is doing an all right job with the storm system and kind of showing us those potential impacts. So we'll move this ahead. Overnight tonight, I do think we are going to see some of these feeder bands work through the state of Florida. In fact, if we kind of look at current radar, I think it'd be great to look at this right now. So yeah, you're already kind of seeing this through the state of Florida. And let's do a sub-regional section right into this area. So again, Florida, you're already seeing a lot of these kind of bands working inland out of the Gulf and even off of the Atlantic. This is going to be a theme, I think, that continues through the night tonight and then into the day tomorrow, probably becoming a little bit more widespread in nature by tomorrow. And you can kind of see that here on this model as we get into the afternoon hours of tomorrow. You're seeing some of these bands. Now, here we go. Tomorrow afternoon, you'll notice a deepening pressure getting down in probably the 950s, maybe the 940s, and we're seeing this is going to be probably the worst of the surge for Fort Myers, Tampa Bay, as the storm is in this region. Quite close to the coast, very strong winds flowing ashore, and this is when we could see surge values of 3 to 5, maybe even 5 to 8 feet into the Tampa Bay area. That tornado threat going to be a big time deal tomorrow through Florida. Also, widespread tropical storm force winds really all day through the peninsula of the Sunshine State here, just due to the spreading out of that wind field. And then areas where it is raining in those feeder bands, expect stronger wind gusts. But even outside of those rain bands, again, going to see some pretty feisty winds here. Now, here we go towards landfall. At this point, again, we're seeing rain really from the tip of the panhandle all the way into the Big Bend where the core of the storm is. The worst of the storm, again, right into this right front quadrant. That'll be the worst of it. So if we get landfall here right into Appalachia Bay, I still expect the worst to be in the Big Bend. But at this point, you'll notice, look at this heavy rain here, even coming back down through portions of eastern Alabama. You folks in Destin, Panama City, you'll get some rain, you'll get some tropical storm force winds out of it. But luckily, storm surge won't be as big of a deal for you just due to the orientation of this. Now we go overnight to Thursday into Friday, and the core of the storm works inland, and this is when those really impressive inland wind gusts are going to begin. Again, the storm could still be a hurricane by midnight, and then finally coming back down to tropical storm strength by the time we get to the overnight, working probably right over or near the Atlanta metro. And at this point in time, this will be the worst of the wind for upstate South Carolina, especially the western upstate. Pickens, Oconee, Anderson, Greenwood, Abbeville County, Lawrence, Greenville County. Now you folks into the eastern upstate through Rock Hill, Chester County, and back down the I-77 corridor into the Midlands, the central and western Midlands, or the central and eastern Midlands. It's going to be a tough call because there's such a tight gradient. You'll notice in this big blob of heavy convection, those will be those strong winds. Right here along the edge of it, it'll be windy for sure, but it just won't be quite as windy. So we could, maybe only be gusting up to 40 into this region, but gusting up to 60 in the region just to the west of there. So the track going to be very important here, and exactly how expansive kind of this core of the storm is at this point is going to be a very important for exactly who gets those direct impacts. All right, and then the storm moves inland after that. So let's talk about kind of what this could look like through the Ohio River Valley as well. You'll notice here, Friday morning, the storm probably somewhere over North Georgia, kind of crossing either into Tennessee or maybe clipping into North Carolina. Again, it could be anywhere in this region, we'll say. So this model further on the east, which is kind of why I'm showing it. I think the storm will be further east. But at this point, again, the worst of it working into the mountains of North Carolina. This will be the worst of the rain probably, the worst of the winds. This is when that power outage concern really begins. And I do expect widespread power outages through much of Georgia, South Carolina, and western North Carolina. It's going to be a problem, to be quite honest with you. And in fact, I would go ahead and prepare to lose power for an extended period of time, because you're not the only one that's going to lose power, and it's going going to take time for these crews to get out there, and obviously keep them in your prayers because they're going to be working overtime here through the next week trying to fix all of this. But the storm then crosses into Tennessee, and I do think we're going to get some rough weather here into eastern Tennessee, the Knoxville area, up through the Tri-Cities, southwestern Virginia, through Blacksburg. That area could see some rougher weather, and then eventually the storm works into Kentucky, and at this point, I'm expecting a big shield of rain from the Ozarks through the Ohio River Valley. Less of a severe weather threat into this area, just probably a good old-fashioned rain, but still gusty with the winds as the storm merges with this upper level low. And then eventually, this is getting into Saturday morning. Things improve and still gusty conditions over the Tennessee and Ohio River valleys. Also cooler temperatures probably, and some showers through the day Saturday as the storm dies out and gets on out of here. All right, another model we'll take a look at. We'll take a look at the H-Wharf, the hurricane model, and I don't think we're running 18Z yet, but we can check. Oh, we actually are running 18Z. Well, look at this. We're all very lucky. We get to look at a brand new model. This just ran, so hot off the press. Congratulations. You're going to be the first to look at this with me. I have not looked at this model yet either, so we'll go ahead and analyze it together at the same time. Still seeing it hit more towards the east side like Cedar Key. Yeah, again, I'm showing you the models that are tilted a little bit to the east out of the fact that that is just my general forecast. I think this will be on the east side of the cone, but this is a model that I'm looking at for the first time with you folks, so I don't know what this one's going to show. So let's go ahead and look at it together, and we'll kind of come to that determination. So latest H-Wharf initializing at 960 millibars, and now is actually a great time to go back to the hurricane hunters and see if we have an updated number. Yeah, so not quite there yet, but H-Wharf is initializing pretty strong here, stronger than the storm is currently, so that could play a role in this. But here we go. Storm strengthens, continues to deepen, works into the Gulf of Mexico, gets close to the Florida Gulf Coast. Here we go. This is 5 p.m. tomorrow. Here's Tampa Bay. Here's kind of the Fort Myers area and the Port Charlotte area. You're noticing, again, this is the worst of the surge tomorrow evening as the storm kind of parallels up the coastline here. Again, seeing some of those rain bands working inland, and that's when some of the worst of the wind will be for you folks along the west coast. Now here we go. Storm continues to strengthen, and I would be a little cautious with this pressure. Again, this is probably overdone by 20, maybe even 30 millibars. I'm expecting a pressure in the 940s, probably near landfall. Now, it could be stronger than that. Could we get into the 930s? That's not off the table at all. So, we'll watch for it. But again, I think this one's a little strong. But here we go, landfall, and you'll notice, yeah, it's a bit further east than, some of the other guidance and kind of east of the cone here, and brings us into the Big Bend, a little more than the Panhandle. Again, this would be the worst of the winds. Landfall, we'll call it, this is a little bit later even. This might be more 9, 10 p.m. tomorrow, so a little bit of a slower solution than we've seen. Gets into South Georgia, continues with its hurricane force winds right through the heart of the state of Georgia here. Again, widespread power outages, generational kind of wind event here, at least from a tropical system. You can't really get much stronger winds than this from a tropical system in this part of the world. And then moving up and then right over the Atlanta metro, and this will be the worst of it for upstate South Carolina. The Savannah River Valley here. Again, this entire kind of blob you see on that north right side of heavy precipitation, that'll be the strongest winds, probably gusting to 60, 65 in isolated spots, sustained winds near 40, 50 miles an hour, just all out tropical storm conditions all the way up into the mountains of South Carolina. Again, this thing is booking him. This is 5 a.m. Friday, Eastern time. Then crosses the mountain chain, gets into Tennessee by daybreak. Again, still seeing very feisty weather in the upstate and the mountains, but that's shifting up through the Tri-Cities, through the Knoxville area. Heavy rain all throughout the northern end of this system, and then eventually getting into Kentucky. Could still see even tropical storm force winds into the state of Kentucky. I wouldn't be completely surprised to see that by any means here going into our Friday afternoon. And then luckily the storm begins to again kind of merge here, does a good old loop-de-loop with the Fujiwara effect, and then kind of dies out over this part of the world. So that's the latest H-Wharf. Look at that. Took a look at that one together. Definitely a important, or not important maybe, but a good model to look at. All right, sorry, I'm reading some comments here, everybody. Watch from Tallahassee. Well, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. All right, let's talk about storm surge because this is going to be a big time threat as well for a lot of folks and something I'm concerned about impact wise here through the Big Bend of Florida. So expecting now, this is new, 15 to 20 feet of storm surge is possible in this kind of area of the Big Bend from the Suwannee River up north, kind of to where you meet the Panhandle. So from that area up or down to the Suwannee River, again, 10 or 15 to 20 feet of storm surge, that's going to cause big time problems. Even down the coast here, Tampa Bay, 5 to 8 feet of storm surge. Charlotte Harbor, 3 to 5 feet. The Inglewood area, 4 to 7 feet of storm surge, all the way down even to the Everglades, 3 to 5 feet of storm surge. It's going to be a problem. Now, for you folks back here from Mexico Beach to kind of the Destin area and towards Mobile, Alabama, good news for you is you're on the offshore wind side of the storm, so way less storm surge totals, if any at all. Really, once you get past the Indian Pass area in general, those totals for storm surge will go down significantly. But from Indian Pass all the way down to the Keys, the entire west coast of Florida likely to see some sort of storm surge out of this system. Suwannee. Yeah, I think I said Suwannee, right? Or maybe I said it a little differently than that. So thanks for the pronunciation help. I do appreciate that. All right, so what could this look like storm surge wise? Well, let's dive into some major metropolitan areas, kind of starting here into the Port Charlotte area, Cape Coral, down into Bonita Springs, and into the Fort Myers area. Again, looking at 3 to 5 feet of storm surge here. So we'll see some flooding for sure, some saltwater flooding. So you kind of just have to know how far you are above sea level. If you're right on the beach, you're likely to see some problems here due to storm surge. If you're further inland, less likely to see those problems. We move north towards the Tampa Bay area. Isolated spots, 5 to 8 feet of storm surge, especially up here near the Clearwater area and just north. Kind of here into the Spring Hill area, storm surge values will go up significantly. And I know we have some mandatory evacuation orders in this area. So obviously, big time storm surge. Now you get to the Spring Hill area and northbound here, kind of Sugar Mill Woods, and I'm trying to see some other town names here if we can get them, which it's kind of getting taken over by the storm surge, unfortunately. But kind of, again, from the Sugar Mill Woods area northward, this is where the surge values really pick up. This is where, again, up to 15 feet of storm surge could move inland. And look at some of these rivers coming well out of their banks here into the Big Bend of Florida. Again, these marshlands are going to get absolutely swamped by the ocean here. And that's going to continue up through the entire Big Bend and then eventually into the Panhandle here near the Tallahassee area. Again, this is miles of storm surge inland into kind of these swampy areas. It doesn't take much to kind of get swamps out of the banks, obviously. And then, again, conditions improve once you get kind of here towards the Mexico Beach area and into this part of the state. Much less in Panama City, Destin, not really expecting any storm surge at all out of this. So good news for you folks. All right, freshwater flooding. This is the highest level risk they can issue for flash flooding, folks. I don't really know what else to tell you here. So if you're, again, right into this region from northeast Georgia into Oconee County, Pickens County, up into the mountains of North Carolina, it's a level 5 out of 5 or a level 4 out of 4, however you want to look at it here. This is basically as bad as it can get for flash flooding. And then another one of those pockets here, right where we're expecting landfall into that point of Florida, and then everywhere in between a moderate risk of flash flooding. So the freshwater flooding is going to be a big time problem. And, it even continues up into the Tennessee River Valley, Nashville, Memphis, Huntsville, Alabama, Knoxville. Again, you folks could see some flooding out of this as well. Don't let your guard down through the southern half of Kentucky here. And then, again, really through the entire state of Tennessee as well. All right, let's take a look at some rainfall totals here, and you'll kind of get the idea of why we're concerned. Latest high-resolution rapid refresh, this big just kind of shield of rain. Again, this is where we're expecting the worst of it, and you get that idea. Now, through the Florida Peninsula, I think it'll be hit or miss. Some folks going to pick up multiple inches of rain. Some folks maybe only an inch or two, depending on exactly how those, banding from the system moves inland. Some folks could get it worse than others for sure. But where we are expecting very confident levels of high rainfall right into the Panhandle, into the Big Bend, and then up this corridor into Georgia, really right through the heart of Georgia, and then into upstate South Carolina, especially the western upstate. I'll keep beating that point home too. When I say upstate, Rock Hill is very different than Clemson in this case. It's probably going to be a lot worse in Clemson than Rock Hill. And we'll zoom in here at some of these rainfall totals. Macon, 6, 7, 8 inches. Atlanta, half a foot of rain. Athens, probably half a foot of rain. These areas of South Georgia, some folks could pick up on 8 to 12 inches of rain. State of South Carolina, I want to, again, make this point very clear. It's going to be very different depending on where you are. Parts of the PD here may only pick up on 1 to 3 inches of rain, while portions of Oconee and Pickens County, we could have more than a foot of rain here up into the higher elevations. And look at this, up near Lake Toxaway. I mean, some of these models are showing, might be hard to read, 16 to 20 inches of rainfall, which, is just more than enough to cause big time problems here between now and the end of the storm. And those high totals of potentially a foot of rain extend well down into the mountains of Georgia, into the foothills. And again, it's going to be a sharp gradient. So we'll move this even north again. Places like Charlotte, it's a tough forecast. The exact location of where the storm goes is going to play a big role in your wind and rain effects. Again, you're under a tropical storm warning, so expecting impacts no matter what here. But we are seeing that that potentially could... sorry, let me move this ahead in time, make sure that we are still going strong here. Sorry, it got paused on my end, so I thought maybe the stream had a bit of a bug. No, looks like we're fine. Sorry, we're talking about flooding and rainfall. So again, sharp gradient here. The Charlotte area, probably 3 to 5 inches of rain, I think is a safe bet. But if you're out here in Monroe, Albemarle, kind of near Uwharrie National Forest, you might only pick up an inch or two of rain. But if you're back near Hickory, Gastonia, the Shelby area, you could get 3 to 5, maybe even 6 inches of rain. So all these tropical systems, it's such a sharp gradient. The Greensboro area, same story. Danville, same story. Now, once you get out towards Raleigh, Fayetteville, Florence, Greenville, North Carolina, Wilmington, Jacksonville, again, I think it's more of a tornado threat there than a flooding threat or even a wind threat, although winds could be gusty for sure. I would be more concerned about the tornado threat out in that part of the Carolinas. But areas to the west of there, again, through the Western Carolinas is where I think this could be, again, a generational type of event. Other areas are going to see rain. Kentucky, Tennessee, again, I think we're going to get more rain here than people expect through portions of the Nashville area back down towards Chattanooga. There's probably going to be a band here of heavy rain that sets up in this region that we'll need to watch for a flash flooding potential with it. Also through the Tri-Cities, Johnson City, maybe 3 to 5 inches of rain. Knoxville, probably 3 to 5 inches of rain, maybe a tad more than that as well. And then up through much of Kentucky, 1 to 3 inches of rain, isolated spots 3 to 5. So not just a Carolina rain event here, more folks than just that are going to see these rough conditions. All right, final thing, and the thing I think probably many of you are here for is the wind gust map. Let's take a look at this, and then I'll answer all your questions and let you go. Again, this will be my last update before I'm eventually out on the road chasing tomorrow morning. So here we go. Again, wind gust map. Let me back this up. Here it comes. Tomorrow afternoon, here is the storm. Again, these very strong winds lashing the west coast of Florida. Tropical storm force winds probably through the entire peninsula of the state, but maybe gusting up near 60 here along the beaches. And then here comes landfall. The worst of the winds working into the Big Bend and the portion of the Panhandle that is kind of on the right-hand side of this, gusting potentially up near 100, 120 miles an hour at times. And then it works inland, and that march inland is going to be a rough one. Look at these hurricane force winds all the way through South Georgia, through Valdosta, again, gusting up near 80, 90, maybe 100 miles an hour. And that continues as the storm continues to move quickly. And I'll go ahead and circle the worst of this wind field. This could shift this way or this way by 50 or 100 miles, depending on the exact track that the storm takes here. So this model brings the worst of it right through West Georgia, West Central Georgia, into the Macon area, into the Augusta area, and then the strongest of the winds through the upstate of South Carolina, gusting again 60 to 65 miles an hour, even gusty winds into Charlotte, 40, 45 mile an hour, 50 mile an hour gusts. Same story for the Midlands of South Carolina. Again, I'll just remind you, the entire state of South Carolina under a tropical storm warning. So we're expecting this wind field to really be quite large here. And then this moves north a bit here, and we'll pick it up. This is very early in the morning Friday. These very high winds through the mountains of North Carolina, upstate South Carolina. Again, expecting big time power outages in this circled area on your map. Again, could be long lasting. Then the storm moves inland into the Ohio River Valley, and we've got widespread winds again as the storm kind of phases with an upper level low here. Wind impacts could continue well inland through Kentucky, southern Indiana, Illinois, and then down back into the Ozarks, and then into the higher terrain of the Virginias, and continuing to stay gusty through North Carolina. And then we get into Friday afternoon here, and overall the wind field kind of dies down. Still very breezy, still very gusty, but less in that tropical kind of way here. Alrighty, folks, that's what I got for you. Let me go ahead and go back and answer all these questions, and then, sorry, I'm trying to pull up this again so we can kind of watch the storm loop a little bit as I answer some of these questions. All right, let me start reading things here and start answering away. All right, not letting your cat play outside tomorrow. Yeah, probably a safe bet. Don't want the cat blown away by any means. So that would be a problem. The flooding is going to be catastrophic. I hope people listen and leave. If you're under evacuation order, just please listen to it. You're going to make everyone's life easier, including your own. So, I mean, even if you want to be selfish about it and think about yourself, you're going to make your own life easier by leaving. I can just go ahead and tell you that right now. Hope everyone has the weather radios. Yeah, that's a good point too. It is that is important for sure to have that, or just as long as you have some way to get warning, even if it's your phone. Oftentimes your phone kind of sends you these notifications now, or your local like news station if they have an app. Oftentimes they'll kind of ping you with that information if a warning gets issued. Turn around, don't drown. Very good point. Yep, if you see a flooded roadway, don't drive through it. It's a bad idea. Alrighty, I think that's probably most of it. I don't see it. Rainfall amounts for Wilmington. Yeah, we can talk about that real quick. Let's see where I had the rainfall map. So Wilmington, again, I would be, if anything, and this is a good point because Wilmington, I know you folks got absolutely rocked by heavy rain a week or two ago with potential tropical cyclone 8. You're going to luck out this time because between Debbie and that, you've had a rough go at it this hurricane season. Luckily, this storm's going to be far enough to your west that the shield rain will be over the western Carolinas. However, through Wilmington and anywhere in North Carolina east of I-77 and east of I-95, I am concerned about a tornado threat specifically overnight Thursday into Friday afternoon as well. So definitely need to watch for that. Winds for Lumberton, North Carolina, if any. Yeah, so Lumberton is out here. And funnily enough, I've been through Lumberton so many times storm chasing. I've lost count at this point. But we can show you that map one more time. So Lumberton kind of into this region here of North Carolina. And you'll notice gusty for sure, especially if some of those tropical bands move on through. You could gust up to tropical storm strength through those bands. But overall, it's going to be kind of more of a hit or miss thing. I don't think it's going to be long-term sustained tropical storm force winds. So kind of the good news there. All right, I'm trying, or not trying, but I want to wait a little bit longer here because, Recon, I think, just passed right through the center one more time. So we'll take one more look at what Recon found, and then we will get out of here and let everyone go. And again, I've got a long time chasing it ahead of me tomorrow. In fact, Mitch just messaged me. I got to respond to him. So, again, Hurricane Hunter's flying in here. Yeah, they're finding pretty good winds here. Let's see what they've got. So flight level winds, the latest looks to be right around 70 knots, it looks like, in the highest level. So again, the storm has leveled off a little bit and strengthening, but that was relatively expected here. I guess it would help if you could kind of see the chart I'm actually showing what it. So yeah, pressure is still probably down near and around 970, 975, that ballpark. Again, the storm's kind of leveled off a little bit, and it's going to stay that way through the next couple of hours, I think, as it filters out the rest of this dry air. But I do think overnight tonight and into tomorrow morning, rapid intensification could begin. Alrighty, folks. Well, I'm going to end it here. Again, wish me luck tomorrow. Stay tuned. I'll be live streaming some during the storm if I can manage it. Mitch West will be live streaming. So if you don't follow him already, do that. Just look up Mitch West Weather or go into my account and you can see all of the or you can see his channel linked as well. So again, it's going to be a busy couple of days, a lot ahead of us, and hopefully you found some use in the live stream. And again, thank you for the donations, those of you that sent them. And if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. Like the live, and again, consider sharing it with somebody so they can go back and watch it and kind of see everything that we talked about. Alrighty, folks, with that said, though, have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. It is. Stay safe out there. Again, I probably won't see you in front of a computer for a couple days here. So we'll kind of debrief at the end there. But with that said, again, have a